You think you are building wealth. You are not. You are building a mortgage. It is the most universally celebrated financial mistake in the modern world. Most people who sign the papers for a bigger, better, more expansive house genuinely believe they are making a brilliant, secure financial move. You have worked relentlessly for this moment. You saved meticulously for the down payment, sacrificing your leisure, your time, and your peace of mind. The bank ran your numbers, scrutinized your income, and approved the loan, officially validating your financial worthiness. Your parents look at the sprawling brick facade and tell you how proud they are of what you have achieved. Your friends come over, walk through the open concept kitchen, and are visibly impressed. Everything in your immediate reality, every societal cue, every nod of approval from your peers makes it feel like your life is moving in the exact right direction. It isn't. The most devastating wealth destroyer in America doesn't look like a reckless gamble. It doesn't look like a bad decision. It looks like a 4-bedroom house in a quiet, manicured suburb with a 2-car garage, vaulted ceilings, and a perfectly fenced yard where the kids can play. It looks like the absolute definition of progress. That is exactly why it is so unimaginably dangerous. There is a quiet anxiety that settles in a few months after the moving boxes are unpacked. The applause has faded. The housewarming parties are over. You are left alone with the reality of the structure you have bound yourself to. You wake up in your spacious primary suite, walk across the hardwood floors you paid a premium for, and you feel an invisible weight pressing down on your chest. On paper, you can afford it. The bank said so. The mortgage calculator said so. But every single month, the margins of your life feel terrifyingly thin. You look at your bank account and wonder where the prosperity is supposed to be. You make a good living, perhaps a top-tier income, yet you are one major inconvenience away from genuine panic. The paycheck comes in, and immediately, it is carved up and fed to the house. You cannot voice this anxiety to anyone, because how can you complain? You have the perfect home. You have the granite countertops. You have the school district. You are living the dream. But you are suffocating. You are trapped in a beautiful, climate-controlled cage of your own making, realizing slowly that you do not own the house. The house owns you. It dictates your career choices, your vacation destinations, and your stress levels. You are standing in the middle of a massive financial sinkhole, completely paralyzed by the fact that society demands you smile and pretend you are winning. Here is the truth, that the real estate industry relies on you never figuring out. The house is not an asset in the way you think it is. It is a highly sophisticated, socially acceptable consumption item. When you stood in that kitchen with the realtor, listening to them talk about square footage, school districts, and hypothetical resale value, you were being sold a fraction of the reality. You were looking at the monthly mortgage payment principal and interest and making your calculations based entirely on that single number. The revelation that changes everything is this. The mortgage payment represents roughly 50 to 60% of the true cost of owning a home. That is it. Just over half. The other 40 to 50% of your housing expense hides in phantom categories that do not appear anywhere on the closing documents. They do not show up in the enthusiastic Zillow listing. They show up later. They arrive quietly, relentlessly, without fail, month after month, year after year, slowly draining your liquidity until you have absolutely nothing left to invest in your actual freedom. The logic of this wealth destruction is mathematical, and it is entirely predictable. Let us break down the phantom costs that shadow your mortgage. Property taxes. The national average runs about 1.1% of the assessed value annually. On a $500,000 home, that is $458 a month. On a $300,000 home, it is $275. That is a $183 monthly difference, just in taxes. But property taxes do not stay flat. Municipalities constantly reassess. In most American metros, property taxes have increased by 3% to 5% annually over the past decade. The gap widens every single year you hold the deed. Homeowners insurance. This scales directly with home value, square footage, and replacement cost. The difference between insuring a $300,000 home and a $500,000 home easily reaches $600 to $1,000 annually. Maintenance. The unspoken rule of thumb in real estate is that you will spend 1% to 2% of the home's value per year simply keeping the structure from falling apart. On a $500,000 home, that translates to $5,000 to $10,000 annually. Larger homes have a larger surface area of roof to replace. They require higher capacity HVAC systems that cost more to repair. They have more plumbing to leak, more square footage to paint, and more windows to seal. The $200,000 price difference at closing translates to $2,000 to $4,000 in additional inescapable maintenance costs every single year. Utilities. A 2,500 square foot home requires 40% to 60% more energy to heat and cool than a 1,500 square foot home. The ambient cost of keeping those empty guest rooms at a comfortable 72 degrees can reach an extra $150 to $250 monthly. Add it all together, the additional property taxes, the higher insurance premiums, the relentless maintenance, the heavier utility load, and you are looking at roughly $8,400 per year in costs that never once appeared in your mortgage payment calculation. That is $700 a month. On top of the higher mortgage payment itself, the true monthly cost difference between a $300,000 home and a $500,000 home exceeds $1,400, $1,400 a month, $16,800 a year. Invested at an average 8% return for 25 years, that money becomes approximately $1.3 million. The bigger house does not cost $200,000 more. It costs you over $1 million more. That is the math the calculators omit. That is the math the real estate agents conveniently forget to mention. Let us look at a micro situation to see how this plays out in human lives. Take two families, same sprawling suburb outside Dallas, Texas, same decade, nearly identical incomes. Kevin and Maria earn a combined $155,000. In 2016, they buy a 4-bedroom house for $320,000. Their mortgage, taxes, and insurance come to $2,100 a month. They rationalize the purchase perfectly. They figure they will grow into it. They want a home office, a dedicated guest room, and sprawling space for the kids. It made total sense on paper. James and Patricia earn a combined $162,000. That exact same year, in the exact same suburb, they buy a 3-bedroom house for $215,000. Their monthly payment comes to $1,400 a month. It is a modest house. The kids have to share a bedroom. The home office inevitably doubles as a cramped guest room. Visitors who know their income occasionally make passive-aggressive comments, mentioning they could easily afford something nicer. James and Patricia smile and say nothing. 10 years pass. Both families are now in their late 40s. Kevin and Maria have exactly $140,000 in retirement savings. Their house has appreciated. It is now worth $480,000, but they still owe $210,000 on the principal. Over the decade, they have bled out $60,000 on repairs, a new roof, an unexpected HVAC failure in the dead of summer, a new water heater, and updated appliances. Their property taxes have surged by 40%. Their homeowner's insurance has nearly doubled. They have never taken a vacation longer than 5 days because the relentless demands of the house simply do not give them the financial margin to breathe. James and Patricia have $620,000 in their retirement accounts. Their house is worth $340,000, but they paid it off entirely 3 years ago. Their monthly housing cost now consists strictly of taxes and insurance. It is about $800. They spent 2 weeks in Portugal last summer without checking their bank accounts once. They are quietly planning to retire at 58. Same suburb, same starting point, same decade. One family built wealth. The other built a house they can barely afford to leave. But the financial mechanics, the taxes, the maintenance, the utility bills are only half the story. The other half is entirely psychological, and it is far more insidious. When Kevin and Maria moved into their sprawling 4-bedroom house, they immediately noticed that their old furniture looked entirely wrong. The scale was off. The perfectly fine couch that filled their previous living room looked pathetic and lost in the new, cavernous space. So, they bought a larger sectional. $3,800. The formal dining room needed a table that fit the aesthetic. $2,200. The massive primary bedroom had an empty corner, practically begging for a sitting area, 2 upholstered chairs, a side table, a rug, $1,400. Each kid now had their own room, which meant each room needed its own matching, full bedroom set. $6,200. The backyard was twice the size of their old yard. It demanded landscaping, a stone patio, and proper outdoor furniture to entertain those impressed friends. $9,500 over the first 2 years. None of these purchases felt reckless. None of them felt extravagant. Each one felt like the absolute bare minimum required to make the house function, to make it feel like a home. The cumulative total easily exceeded $25,000 within 3 years of moving in. James and Patricia, in their smaller home, spent roughly $4,000 on minor updates. That $21,000 difference between them, invested at 8% for 20 years, becomes approximately $98,000, gone. Not because Kevin and Maria were financially illiterate, not because they were careless, because the house created a context. The context created expectations, and the expectations created an endless cycle of spending that felt completely undeniably justified at every single step. It did not stop at the property line. When Kevin's car eventually died, they did not replace it with just anything. They replaced it with a vehicle that would not look out of place parked in the driveway of their specific neighborhood. $48,000. James replaced his car with a reliable, unassuming used vehicle. 1,000,000 yuan. The house was the anchor. Every single other financial decision in their lives orbited around its gravitational pull. This is the precise mechanism that makes housing the #1 wealth killer. It does not just extract money directly from your bank account. It fundamentally reshapes the entire psychological framework through which you make every other financial decision for the next 20 or 30 years. Think about what that missing $1,400 a month actually displaces. It comes from somewhere. It comes from your retirement contributions. It comes from your emergency fund building. It comes from your brokerage accounts. It strips away the financial margin that gives you leverage when life inevitably does not go as planned. A family that could have comfortably saved 20% of their income now saves 8%. A family that could have maxed out their 401k now contributes just enough to get the employer match, telling themselves they will catch up later. A family that could have built a bulletproof 6-month emergency fund stays perpetually hovering at a precarious 2 months of reserves. This squeeze is completely invisible because it is defined by absence. You do not see the retirement contributions that never happened. You do not miss the compound investment growth that never occurred. You just feel vaguely, constantly tight every month without fully understanding why you feel so poor while making so much money. If Kevin and Maria had bought the smaller house and simply routed that $1,400 monthly difference into a basic index fund at an 8% return, they would have accumulated approximately $258,000 in that account alone over 10 years. They do not have that $258,000. The drywall absorbed it. And then there is the upfront destruction of capital, the down payment. To buy a $500,000 home with 20% down, you need to hand over $100,000 in cash at closing. To buy a $300,000 home, you need $60,000. That $40,000 difference is capital that is permanently exiled from your investment portfolio. It will never compound. $40,000 invested at 8% for 30 years becomes approximately $402,000. Most people never experience this as a sacrifice because they never see the alternate reality where the money grows. The investment returns are theoretical to them. The house is tangible. The psychological weight of human perception falls entirely on what you can touch, walk through, and paint. But the money is gone, and the compounding is lost, regardless of whether you are capable of feeling its absence. Consider Sarah. Sarah bought a 4-bedroom colonial in suburban Boston in 2012 for $580,000. She was earning $170,000 annually as a software engineering manager. The mortgage seemed entirely manageable to her. She had worked 15 grueling years in tech for this status. She felt she deserved something nice. By 2022, Sarah was 53 years old. She had $210,000 in retirement savings. Her house had appreciated beautifully. It was worth $940,000. But she still owed $320,000 on the mortgage. Her property taxes had climbed ruthlessly to $14,000 annually. Maintenance on the aging Colonial averaged $12,000 a year. Utilities ran $450 a month just to keep the empty rooms conditioned. Sitting at her kitchen island one evening, she finally did the math she should have done in 2012. If she had bought a $350,000 condo closer to the city instead and invested the difference in carrying costs, she would have accumulated approximately $800,000 in liquid investment accounts. She had $210,000. The staggering gap between those two numbers was her actual retirement. Because of that gap, Sarah is now forced to plan on working until she is 67 instead of 60. She will sell the house eventually. After paying off the remaining mortgage and surrendering the real estate commissions, she will net roughly $550,000. Combined with her modest savings and continued forced contributions over the next 14 years, she might have enough to retire quietly. If she had bought the smaller home, she could walk away from her job next year with over $1 million in liquid, invested assets. She would have absolute autonomy. Instead, she has a beautiful, historic house she cannot afford to leave, and another decade of corporate stress ahead of her. Here is the underlying philosophy that makes this trap so ruthlessly effective. Americans have been systematically conditioned to believe that buying the biggest house you can barely afford is responsible financial behavior. Real estate agents strongly encourage stretching your budget to buy into better neighborhoods, heavily implying it is an investment in your children's future. Parents advise buying far more space than you currently need because you will naturally grow into it. The financial media relentlessly celebrates home equity as the bedrock foundation of middle-class wealth. But home equity is entirely illiquid. It is dead money. You cannot spend it to buy groceries. You cannot use it to pay for medical bills without selling the house, taking on high-interest debt, or uprooting your entire life. It sits there, theoretically incredibly valuable, practically completely inaccessible. Furthermore, the narrative of the house as a supreme investment is historically false. Home appreciation historically lags behind stock market returns by a massive, wealth-altering margin. Between 1990 and 2020, United States home prices increased approximately 4.1% annually, on average. The S&P 500 returned approximately 10.7% annually over the exact same period. A dollar invested in stocks grew to roughly $8. A dollar invested in housing grew to roughly $3.50. The pervasive narrative that a house is an investment heavily benefits real estate agents who earn percentage-based commissions on larger transactions. It benefits mortgage lenders who earn decades of interest on larger loans. It benefits local governments that desperately need to collect more property tax revenue to fund their budgets. It does not benefit the homebuyer, who unknowingly trades liquid investment returns for empty square footage. Time is the one variable you cannot manipulate, and it is the exact variable the big house steals from you. When you are young, you think you can out-earn a bad financial decision. You think your income will rise, the mortgage will feel smaller, and eventually, the math will work out. But the phantom costs rise with your income, the taxes go up, the roof degrades, and while you are busy maintaining the asset, the decades slip by. Your 30s become your 40s. Your 40s become your 50s. The years you should have spent letting compound interest do the heavy lifting are instead spent paying contractors and funding municipal tax deficits. By the time you realize the gravity of the mathematical error, the opportunity is dead. You cannot go back to age 35 and reclaim the $1,400 a month. You cannot retroactively inject $40,000 into the S&P 500 and ask for the last 20 years of compounding. The money is gone, but more tragically, the time is gone. You traded the most productive decades of your financial life for a guest room that gets used 4 times a year and a yard you have to pay someone to mow. James and Patricia did not buy the smaller house because they could not afford the larger one. They bought the smaller house because they fundamentally understood a concept that Kevin and Maria did not. The house is never the goal. The house is merely a tool, a piece of infrastructure that either supports or undermines your actual goal. The actual goal is financial freedom. It is the sovereign ability to retire precisely when you choose, not when your biological limitations force you to. It is the ability to weather a sudden corporate layoff or an industry shift without a spike in your heart rate. It is the profound ability to make major life decisions based entirely on preference rather than suffocating financial necessity. The couple in the modest home has options. The couple in the stretched home has obligations. Kevin and Maria's house is undeniably beautiful. 4 bedrooms, a sprawling yard, an enviable neighborhood. Everyone who visits them says something complimentary. James and Patricia's investment account balance is completely invisible. Nobody sees it when they walk through the front door. Nobody comments on the elegance of their index funds. The immense, unshakable peace of mind does not show up in family photographs. One family optimized their entire existence for appearance. The other optimized strictly for outcomes. When you are 62 years old, sitting at a table deciding whether you can finally stop working or whether you must drag yourself through another 3 years of corporate politics, the balance of your investment account is the only metric that matters. The house will still be there. It will still be costing you money. It will still require a new roof. It will still demand its pound of flesh in property taxes. The only question is whether you will have the absolute freedom to enjoy it, or whether you will be forced to keep working simply to afford the privilege of living in it. That specific question does not get answered at 62. It is already answered at 38, or 42, or the exact moment you sit down with a pen and sign the 30-year mortgage documents on a house that is vastly bigger than you actually need. The math never lies, and the math strongly favors the smaller house.